It's a Wednesday edition of Husker247 Daily. I'm Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson. The offseason marches on. We're barely into it. Not even the offseason, I guess. There's still a bowl game to be played, but we're trending towards offseason topics. Chief of which is Nebraska's coaching staff and possible additions, possible restructuring. Where do you want to go first?
Let's talk about.
Let's do a choose your own adventure here, Brian. Where do you want to go?
Okay, I pick possible offensive staff additions for 200. What have you got?
So Matt Rule yesterday hinted quite strongly that there was going to be an addition on the offensive side of the ball. Didn't say who, didn't say what role, full time, off the field, whatever. But
Wait 1 second. Is that a better teaser than the mystery player who was on the scout team last fall that might step in for some snaps in like November or whatever year that? Maybe that was 2 years ago, I guess.
Yeah. That
I don't know.
A lot of bandwidth was eaten
ago.
up on that topic.
Go on.
So the name out there is Lonnie Teasley, former South Carolina offensive line coach. Just first blush at the resume there. What do you make of it? Likely an off the field hire, but a guy that brings quite a bit of juice on the recruiting side.
Yeah, you've done some good reporting work behind the scenes. Definite Nebraska interest. I know it's sort of been reported. It's expected he's going to be here. It would be a good landing spot for him because he was at South Carolina the last 3 years and got let go because they were in the middle of a 4-8 season. But as you say, in talking to people, he's an extraordinary recruiter. And so, I mean, you can't honestly get all that caught up all the time anymore. And like, who are the 10 we quote unquote full-time assistants? You know what I mean? Like, this is all about like, how deep is your staff and those positions beyond. And so, I do believe he was the guy that Rule was referring to yesterday. And that's a considerable hire if you get someone on your staff who is just the an SEC O-line coach the last 3 years and has a prowess with connecting with recruits as he does.
Yeah, I was checking in last night and yesterday afternoon with some folks, longtime SEC reporters in our network. On the recruiting side of things, said he was one of the best offensive line recruiters they've ever seen.
Wow.
And you look at the recruits that he brought in during his time there and at his other stops. There's a lot of star power there. They were not lacking for blue chip prospects along that offensive line. And, you know, I think that's probably more what they would look for in this role, is somebody that can recruit, somebody that kind of helps out Jeep Wade with the offensive line coaching part of it. But you know, that those types of roles, and I think you hit on it well there. You basically have to determine your 10 recruiters who count and go on the road. And you know, last year Nebraska had Keith Williams, the personnel director, as one of them. Jamar Mosey was another one, as a guy that went out and recruited that wasn't a full-time assistant coach. So that type of a hire certainly gets your attention when you're talking about just this theme of reshaping the trenches. Like you went and got a new offensive line coach. You're also really bulking up potentially your recruiting efforts for offensive linemen, which, I mean, you know how it is. I mean, even in a small class, you want to bring in 3-4 guys that you kind of get into that pipeline, you develop them and bring them along. And then hopefully, you know, end of year 2 or 3, you've got guys that are ready to step in and start. And that would be, I think, a pretty strong move for Nebraska to have somebody like that on their staff who can, you know, speak to that level of talent.
Yeah, and Rule mentioned yesterday also he thinks Jeep Wade is an outstanding recruiter too. And so, I mean, that's pretty interesting, sort of that it wasn't really that under the surface, as Rule talked during his press conference about like they actually have recruited, I think, okay on the O-line, but it was clear through a couple of the things he said that he thinks there's another level they can go, like in the trenches, and these two hires together speak to that idea. So we'll see what happens, but it sort of seems like it's in the making on that one.
On the defensive side of the ball, we talked about it yesterday. Matt Rule announced that Terry Braden Jr. No longer on staff after 1 year. They're moving on from him. Report yesterday from our Matt Zenitz that Elijah Robinson, the former Texas A&M assistant, former Matt Rule assistant, and former Syracuse defensive coordinator, I think those are all the formers. It is not trending towards LSU in the way that was thought maybe 72 hours ago and over the weekend when he was in Baton Rouge. Nebraska reportedly among the schools competing for him. Penn State, Texas A&M again in that mix as well, all battling it out for a pretty big name in the assistant coaching circles and another really solid recruiter in his own right. What do you kind of make of that whole, not just with him, but kind of what's in front of Nebraska as they fill another role on the staff?
Well, it would be a home run if you got that one. There's a lot of elbows out to try to claim him. Penn State, I think, is one of the schools, as you mentioned, that's interested. That's his alma mater. SEC schools, I think there's maybe some traction with at least a program or two there that will have interest in him. All these schools can pay a lot. Nebraska can too. That's the one thing I always say. We don't have to shortchange Nebraska and always act like they're at the kids table when it comes to these discussions. We reported yesterday, like, about the strength coach, like he's going to make $1 million+ moving forward. So there are some resources to spend on people you value. So it's good that Nebraska's in the hunt, but it's one of those where it's tough to know because there are so many players involved in the conversation. And I know, like, LSU thought they had him, like, I think kind of locked up Saturday, or at least that was sort of the reporting out of there. And it's definitely turned where at least that's not a given at all. In fact, it seems like doesn't it seem like it's now slanted more toward the field over LSU a little bit in that conversation? But the question is where Nebraska stacks in that field, and I'm not sure yet if they're at the top or not. I think Rule's connection with them helps, though.
Yeah, well, and it feels like, the farther this gets away from the weekend, like the less likely LSU is, just
Right.
from what was coming out over there. But the other kind of factor in all this too is you've got a new defensive coordinator who I would imagine is going to have some say potentially in who would be brought in. Also, maybe just kind of reshifting roles a little bit on defense. I mean, you're going to be running a little bit of a different system. They kind of set things up a little bit differently at San Diego State than the way Nebraska had things in 2025. What can you kind of say, I guess, about the potential there, and also maybe
Yeah.
how that defensive line opening fits into all those questions?
I mean, there's a couple names you just automatically look at because of the spot that's open, and one is David Losay, who was the D-line coach for Orich at San Diego State, and obviously they had great numbers and worked well together. So I don't think people should be too upset if he brings one of his guys in who contributed to a defense that was top 10 in 10 different categories. Roy Manning is another coach on that staff who was like an edge defender coach for them this past season. And so those are kind of the two names that, because of what's open for Nebraska, that are sort of on your radar as this plays out over the next couple of days. And the fact that Rule said, what you'd expect, that Orich, of course, has a big say, like in who he wants to work with. And that's a huge deal. Like, sometimes we can get caught up in like who's the biggest name out there, the biggest fish, but really it comes down to who can get on the same page as your DC the quickest. And it would make a lot of sense if it ends up being one of the San Diego State guys too.
Definitely. Couple more minutes here. What are you? just in terms of the way these these hires have gone so far since the end of the season, I mean, we're expecting something fairly quickly here.
I kind of think
Given that
so.
Matt Rule said that you could potentially have whoever's coaching the defensive line in coaching for the bowl game.
Yeah, I think it's become a bigger deal and it's understood by Rule. Maybe it goes back to the Holgerson thing, even last year when he was able to bring him in season with those 3 games. And although that was difficult at the time, I think he saw the advantage in like a coach getting that up close visual of like what he has to work with, what he needs. And so we already have seen that with the DCs on the ground already working. And Jeep Wade's here, the O-line coach, and that's a big deal. I mean, he's coaching those guys up for the bowl game. So I am like you. I kind of expect this to move pretty fast because I do think they'd like whoever it is to get around the guys and coach some in the bowl game. Right now, you have Eckler sort of helping with Phil Simpson and Ira Savage Lewis working with the D-line. That's kind of an interesting storyline too, Bruntz. Like Eckler's sort of got in the defensive side, and I do wonder if Orich might include that going forward. We'll see on that, but it's obvious that Eckler's important too to the bowl game prep with that D-line.
Real quickly, Nebraska basketball opens conference play tonight at home at 8:00 against Wisconsin. Wisconsin, a slight favorite, I think 1.5 points in this one. Do you have a prediction before we go?
It was last night, and then I don't know if that was a placeholder line. Nebraska now by 1.5 favored this morning. So, or maybe the Sharks got news of something there.
Wow.
Yeah, this is basically a pick'em game, and Wisconsin is hot right now, just like Nebraska. They beat Marquette by 20. They were blowing the doors off Northwestern in their last 2 games. They're just outside of the top 25. This is a critical one, Bruntz, because you have to go to Illinois Saturday, and then you got to sit on whatever your Big Ten record is until basically January 2nd. And so, again, same defensive energy that they had against Creighton. Can they bring that for 40 minutes? Can they set the tone, get on the floor for a 50-50 ball right away, get the crowd juiced up? They literally will be juiced up because it's an 8 p.m. tip-off, so that'll help. But Nebraska needs to feed them early. And if they can, we know how tough PBA can be. It wasn't the vault last year, but that's the big focus, is trying to make it that again this year. And so far, so good.
You heard it here first. Get juiced up, feed them early. Keys to victory. We'll have plenty from that game, much more on Nebraska's staffing things. Some recruiting on the site right now as well as the 27 class gets rolling. Some updates from our national folks there with players of note that Nebraska fans should know very quickly. So get to Husker247 for all that. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Husker247 Daily.